All right, good morning and welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning for Coach Franklin's press conference. We will get rolling with an opening statement from Coach. Coach?
All right, good morning. Appreciate everybody joining us. I thought I would start with an opening statement before we get into questions. The announcement to postpone football was extremely disappointing. Witnessing the confusion on our guys' faces when I shared their news of postponement last week was gut-wrenching. It is my responsibility to help our guys chase their dreams, and delivering the news felt like I was doing the opposite. It felt like I was taking away their dream to play at Penn State, even if for some it's only temporary. We as a coaching staff and administration fought as hard as we could to fulfill the desires of our student athletes and their parents to play this fall. While I appreciate the complexities and difficulties of this decision for the leaders of our conference, I'm extremely frustrated because we still have very few answers to communicate to our young men and their families about their futures, and very little understanding of the factors contributing to the decisions. Penn State has worked extremely hard to provide the safest environment possible for our student athletes over the last 3 months. Our student athletes have matched our institution's diligence by following the recommended health and safety protocols with the intent to play this fall. Our most recent COVID-19 test of our entire program, student athletes, coaches, athletes, trainers, strength and conditioning, and equipment staffs, yielded 0 positive results after our first week of practices. That is attributed to the steadfast efforts of our medical professionals, student athletes, and staff. We're heartbroken for our student athletes because of how much they've sacrificed to put themselves in position to compete at the highest level. But now they're left frustrated and unsure of what the future holds. Despite our current circumstances, I couldn't be more pleased with how our players and entire organization have handled themselves for the last 5 months during very challenging times. It's not lost on me the impact this postponement has on the State College community. Our town is fueled and driven by the football season. I feel for the people in this community and the effect this decision has on our local businesses as well. As we turn our attention to the potential of a winter season, we will lean into our culture and develop a thorough, detailed plan on how to move forward. When we do return to competition, we know our guys will be ready, and will continue to be I will continue to be unbelievably proud to be their head coach. I appreciate everybody's time this morning, and I look forward to answering questions.
24/7.
Good morning, James. Great to hear from you. I hope you and the family are healthy right now.
You too, Tyler.
What is your understanding of how the Big Ten ultimately finalized its postponement of the fall sports schedule? Sandy said she was unclear of such details, and do you think that outcome on August 11th was acceptable? It sounds like you would not feel that way based on your opening statement.
Yeah, I guess the best way for me to describe it is, and I've said this before, is I don't necessarily have a issue with the decision, but I have an issue with the process, and I got an issue with the timing. It was challenging to keep getting up in front of my team and getting up in front of my parents and not having answers to their questions. So to me, if we were going to make the decision to delay the season, that we at least took the time to work with the NCAA and the Big Ten to have all the answers for what that's going to mean when it comes to eligibility, when it comes to scholarships, when it comes to, the next opportunity to play, when that is it the spring? Is it the winter? Is it going to not be to next season? What does that mean with roster management? What does that mean with incoming recruits? I've met almost weekly with our players, their parents, and also recruits. And it's difficult to continue getting up in front of those people as the leader of my organization and not only deliver bad news, but not be able to deliver the answers to their questions. I think that's the job of the leader, is to set the vision, set the plan, and then drive everybody towards that vision and that plan. And when you do face challenges or issues, it's the job of the leader either to have the answers or find the answers. And I was not able to do that. So that was the challenge. How we got to this decision, I'm not in position to answer that because I wasn't in the room. But I do know when you make a decision of this magnitude that affects so many people on such a significant level, maybe the most important decision in the history of the Big Ten, it wasn't made in ambiguity. It wasn't vague. There's no way we made this decision without everybody being clear on what the decision was.
Hey, James, how you doing?
Good. Hey, Mike.
You talk a lot about unintended consequences.
Hey, Mike, real quick, did you guys hear all that, or am I breaking in and out because I didn't hear the question being asked to you? Did you guys hear all that? Okay. Everybody but Ben Jones is shaking their head yes, so I'm hoping you did.
So everyone's on brand. You talk a lot about unintended consequences. What does it mean if 3 of the Power 5 play and you don't in the fall? And what does it mean if you don't play in the spring vis-a-vis those other 3?
Yeah, there's obviously this decision isn't just playing in the fall. It's going to impact a lot of different things. It'll impact recruiting. If we're playing and they're out recruiting, that's going to have an impact, a long-term impact. If we have our rosters at over 85 and they have their rosters at only 85, that's going to have an impact. I saw a decision that was on social media that came out last night that said, we're only going to get 12 hours right now to work with our team when everybody else is practicing. I think right now, if you look at, certain teams that we're competing with nationally, they got 20 more practice opportunities right now when you count spring ball and the summer that we've had. So, it's going to have much more of an impact than just not playing this fall. And how quickly can we get back to normal operations? So the decisions we make have to be not only the impact that it has on the short term, but how can we limit the impact of the long term? And I think that's where I think coaches are very valuable in this process, because coaches are always thinking like that. They're thinking short term and they're thinking long term. And I think that's where we help in the process of the decision-making process to understand what we're doing and truly the impact of it. So Mike, yeah, I agree with you. It's not as simple as maybe some people think, that it's just going to impact this fall. Depending on how this all plays out, what happens with other conferences, what happens with us, our Big Ten and specifically Penn State, it's going to be more significant than that. So I think that's the real challenge, Mike, is how do we find a way to make this decision as least negatively impactful as we can.
Do you have me now, Coach? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Greg Pickle, Penn Live.
Hey, James, how you doing?
Hey, Greg.
Hey, I think we've learned a lot over the years with dealing with you, that even when maybe you don't have all the answers, you're still going to put a plan in place to move forward as best you can. So what is that plan right now? Maybe, since the decision, the next couple of weeks before classes begin, what can you have the guys do, and what can you do to move forward while you wait for all those answers that come in?
Well, I think that's where the problem has been, Greg, is, like I said, it's hard to get up in front of the team and set the plan and the vision when literally I just found out last night what we're able to do and the amount of hours we're able to do. So it's hard for me to set a plan for the team and set a plan for my staff when I didn't know what type of access we were going to have. We put a plan together, but it was based on 20 hours. I don't agree at all with the 12 hours. That makes no sense, that other teams are going to be playing a season and we're only going to get to work with our guys for 12 hours. The problem is when we vote on these things, you got voting from basically everybody from all the different conferences. And right now, the only people voting in what's in the best interest of the Big Ten is the people from the Big Ten. So, it's a little bit of a challenge in how we do things when, just like me, I'm not sitting here. I'm sitting here wishing what's best for college football. I'm not sitting here wishing what's best for the Big Ten. I'm not sitting here wishing what's best for just our athletes here at Penn State. I'm wishing what's best for the athletes across the country, across conferences. So I can't understand how us being able to work with our student athletes for 12 hours when other people are getting the full season, how that's in the best interest of college football, how that's in the best interest of our student athletes, how that's in the best interest of the Big Ten and specifically at Penn State. So that's been the challenge with all of this is coming up with a plan to move forward and get everybody excited and driven towards that plan when you're dependent on so many others that may not understand the consequences of the decisions they're making.
No? There we go. Audrey Snyder, The Athletic. Audrey?
He's muted.
You got me now?
Yep. We got you.
Okay, thanks. James, going off of everything that you've said about all these unknowns, you mentioned last week about potentially playing in domes in the spring. I mean, what do you think is the feasibility of a spring season, and what kind of concern would you have then with the turnaround time from spring to fall 2021?
Yeah, I think everything that we decide, we have to think about how do we get back to what we would consider normal for the 21 season and moving forward. So whatever decisions we make now, we got to make sure that it doesn't impact us moving forward. So whether that is a spring season or whether that is a winter season, I think we have to look at that. And I think there's been a lot of discussions going on about that and a lot of different models being proposed. But I think the importance from my perspective is we have to make sure that if we go with a model, that the model has the least amount of impact moving forward. So, I'm open to playing. I think you guys have known that from the beginning. As long as we can do it in a way that keeps our student athletes safe and healthy and protected. And I think that's what was frustrating when we got shut down, is we basically just got done practicing for a week. And when we tested our entire organization, coaches, players, trainers, anybody that comes in contact with our team, we didn't have one positive. So I think that's the challenge, is when you're working so hard to make something work and you're showing that you can make it work, at least on our campus. And then the decision is made to cancel. So I'm open to playing as long as we can do it in a way that we keep our guys, and not just our guys, but the teams that we're playing, safe. And, if we can find a way to do that, which I think there are some models that I've been very vocal about, then hopefully we can make it work.
Elton Hayes, CNHI, Pennsylvania.
Good morning, Coach. Good to see you. Hope you and your family are doing well.
You too, Elton.
Coach, I wanted to ask you, I know a lot of the players have been vocal on social media, obviously disappointed by the decision that was handed down last week. You know, like you said, they would practice just the week before, I mean, just the day before, with the idea that they were going to start the season soon, and having to be let down like that. You know, Coach, in conversations with these guys and with their parents, you know, what are you saying to them to kind of keep them motivated when there's so much uncertainty out there right now?
Well, I think that's, again, the challenges that we face as coaches is, you know, we have a responsibility to fight for our players and to fight for our parents and to fight for our program. And we have to do that in a way that keeps everybody focused on what we're trying to achieve. But then we also have to do it in a way that aligns with the university and that aligns with the Big Ten and that aligns nationally. And that's more challenging than you could imagine. And I'm a chain of command guy, and I'm a loyal guy. And that's a difficult thing to do is how do you work hard to represent, you know, all those separate entities and do it in a way that no one gets rubbed the wrong way. And the challenge is, I don't know if that's possible right now. You know, you're gonna rub someone the wrong way, but ultimately my responsibility has to be to my players and my parents and my program, and try to do that in a way that, you know, the reality is if I'm doing the right thing for those people in that group, it should also be the right thing for our university, and it should be the right thing for the Big Ten, and it should be the right thing for college football.
Mark Brennan, Lions 24/7.
James, thank you for doing this today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you, buddy.
The decision that you and your family made for you to be up in State College and them in Florida, how difficult was that? And how difficult was it for you going through all of this stuff without your family to kind of lean on? Because I know how important, I hope I'm not being too personal here, but I think people would be interested in, because it's a unique situation.
Well, let me lead by this, that, you know, I also know that we're fortunate and blessed to have a separate residence that we could make that choice, you know, so I do want to lead with that, because not everybody has that opportunity. But yeah, it's, you know, it's challenging. I got 12 and 13-year-old daughters that I don't get to spend enough time with as it is. And I just want to make sure everybody understands, you know, the reason that we made that decision is my youngest daughter has sickle cell disease, which obviously with this new virus and not completely understanding this new virus, we don't have the information or the data of how it would affect, you know, my daughter. So, you know, as a family, we're going to do everything we possibly can to keep our kids safe. No different than I'm trying to do the same thing within my organization. So, you know, we made the decision, but it's not been easy, you know, and probably more so on my daughters than anything. So, you know, when we decided to cancel, you know, the season, you know, I decided that I was going to, you know, go see them because the plan was I wasn't going to be able to go visit them at all during the season, and they weren't going to come be able to visit me because, you know, we couldn't quarantine appropriately to make sure everybody's safe. So, you know, what I ended up doing was waiting for my COVID test to come back. And I think my COVID test came back negative at like 6 o'clock. I want to say on Monday, and I jumped in the car right at that moment. And once the test came back negative, I jumped in the car and drove from 6 at night till 6:30 in the morning to try to spend a few days with my daughters before coming back to Penn State and quarantining again and getting back to work. So, you know, it just had been an emotional roller coaster for our staff and for our players. So I gave everybody, you know, the time off to go hug their moms, to go, you know, hug their dads or their brothers and sisters, go spend some time. And then once we find out what the new plan is, you know, get back to work again. But that means us coming back, getting tested again, quarantining again. And, you know, obviously feedback from some of the parents
and the majority of the parents that they felt like our players were safer at Penn State. And we had a number of players that decided to do that stayed in State College. We got a number of staff members that decided to do that and stay in State College. So that's been the challenge with all of this. It's personal and professional for all of us.
Donnie Collins, Times Tribune.
Hey, James, thanks for doing this, and it's good to hear from you.
You too, Donnie.
We've seen the petitions from some of the players to play, the letters from the parents demanding answers, and I'm wondering how you hope those kind of move the conversation along in a positive way for them, and do you see any scenario where they might change minds?
Yeah, I love to see our players have voices. I love to see the parents have voices. I know they do within our organization, and we've had a lot of really good conversations. I had a meeting with the parents last night, and it's hard because you continue to have these meetings, but you still don't have a whole lot of answers for them. But I still think the ability to get together and look each other in the face and let them know what you do know is important. Do I think things are going to change? I don't think we're going to go back to a fall season. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the petitions and the voices are going to allow us to go back and say, we're going to play this fall. I wish that was the case, but I don't see that happening.
Hi, James.
Chris, I couldn't hear you again.
Okay. James, thanks for your time today. I'm glad to hear that your family is well.
You too, Rick.
Following up on Donnie's question, do you believe that the voices of the coaches in the Big Ten, the parents, and especially the players have been heard by the Big Ten leadership who made this decision?
Yeah, I think they have now. I don't know if they were heard clearly before the decision. I think that's fair to say. I think they've been heard now, but I don't know if they were heard before the decision was made.
Adam Richford.
You're muted, Rich.
Hold on.
You're muted, Rich.
Hold on, Rich.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rich.
James, is that one of your greatest frustrations with this? Is that their voices weren't heard before the decision was made?
Well, I guess what I would say is, I can speak for my organization. The way for me to make the best decisions for Penn State football is to hear my coach's perspective, is to hear my staff's perspective, is to hear my players' perspective, to hear from my administration, Scott Sidwell and Sandy Barber, and when appropriate, the parents. I wouldn't say it happens, for decisions within the program, but major decisions that it would be. So I guess what I'm saying is, for me to make the best decisions for the organization and not have blind spots, I need to hear from all those different groups when appropriate and when feasible. And I know within our organization, that's how we do it. And that puts me in the best position to make the best decision with as much information and as many angles and as many perspectives covered. So I think that, whenever feasible, that's the best way to do it. And I also understand that those things aren't always feasible, but again, that goes back to what I said before is, I don't really have an issue with the decision, because at the end of the day, we made a decision based on what we thought was in the student athletes' best interest from a health and welfare standpoint. And let's understand, everybody understands the magnitude of this decision. So you know, I think in some ways there should be, you know, there should be some praise for the decision that was made, you know. But I think, as I've stated before, my issue has been the process and the timing of it, not necessarily the actual decision that was made.
Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com.
Hey, good morning, James. Kind of similar to Rich's question, I'm just wondering what direct communication has the coaches had with Commissioner Warren before and after the decision? Because obviously there doesn't seem to have been a lot. And I'm just wondering what you can share about the direct communication between, because obviously he has responsibilities to the presidents and the ADs, but how much was there actually communication with the coaches?
Yeah, I think as a conference, we do a pretty good job. And I think you guys know I got somewhat of a unique experience because I've been a head coach in two major conferences. So I think the amount of communication that we have had before and after has been pretty good. But when the decision was actually being made, you know, it caught a lot of people off guard, you know, because at that time, you know, we felt like things were going pretty good. We felt like we were going to be able to make this thing work, and things changed quickly. So I guess specifically to the decision, it happened quickly. And again, I think that's where the frustration comes from. The decision came before everybody being able to get on board with it and understanding it, so you could get up in front of your team and get up in front of your parents and say, this is the decision that's been made, and this is why, and, you know, and I understand it. And, you know, that I think would have been helpful. But there was communication before and there was communication after. But, you know, when things started to swing in the wrong direction, that's when there wasn't a whole lot of communication.
Dave Jones, Penn Live.
Hi, James. Thanks. Thanks. I hope you're well.
Here, Dave.
I hesitate to even ask this, but I feel like I'm compelled to. Is Penn State absolutely now committed to the winter or the spring? Because you know, lots of the parents groups are trying to reverse the decision. And last night there was a blogger in Columbus saying that Eric Barron was on board with a plan for Penn State to actually play in a home-and-home schedule with 5 other Big Ten teams. To be clear, you haven't heard of anything about something like this, and you don't think that's true. I want to make sure of that.
You said a blogger? Is that what you said?
Yeah, a guy's named Jeff Snook. He used to write for the Palm Beach Post, and he's got a lot of Ohio State connections now. I don't believe he works for anyone in particular now.
Yeah, I have not heard anything about that plan and that model. But let me also say this, Dave. You know, when I made the statement that I did about exhausting every opportunity to play, you know, for my team and for my parents and for our staff and for our players, you know, that's really what I was talking about, you know, and I brought that up months earlier, that, you know, there could be a situation where certain teams, you know, may be able to make this thing work and other teams wouldn't, based on state rules and guidelines and how the university is handling it and their plan. So that's what I was talking about at that time, that the Big Ten may have a decision to make. Do they allow teams for a year to play outside of the conference? Because it was not going to be the same. You know, I had mentioned some programs and people got upset with the programs I was mentioning, and I wasn't, you know, mentioning any specific programs for a reason. I was just saying, you know, Nebraska's challenges may be different than Penn State's challenges, compared to Rutgers' challenges, compared to Wisconsin's challenges, just based on, you know, the demographics. But specifically to your question, I have not heard anything about that within the Big Ten. I have not heard anything about that in reference to Penn State. I haven't heard anything about that, but I just, I thought I would also add that point and clarify, what I was talking about earlier.
Tobias Wilborn, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Hey, Coach Franklin, how are you doing, man?
Good, Tobias.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Question I have is possibly with the pod situation, that would still mean potentially no home games at Beaver Stadium. If any,
could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I lost you there for a
I'm
second.
sorry, my computer broke up. What I was saying was if the pod situation goes, there could still possibly not be home games at Beaver Stadium. What, if any, responsibility does the athletic department or university have to the community that's trying to get through during these tough times, hoping for maybe some spring football?
Yeah, when you said pod situations, I'm not familiar with.
Oh, I mean like the domes. I'm sorry. The
Yeah.
dome people were talking about, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think obviously all these things are factoring in. I will tell you this. As the head football coach at Penn State, I carry a weight with me, not just for my players and our coaches and our staff. I also carry the weight of the athletic department. I know that the success of Penn State football impacts more than just Penn State football. That's 31 sports. I also know the impact it has on the community. I feel ingrained in this community. I go on my little walks through town and, up Beaver and down College or vice versa. And I feel the weight of that I know that Penn State football has a significant impact, on the community, on the people in our community, on the businesses in the community. And I recognize that. And all those things, when I talk about the impacts of the decisions we make, they're more than just, playing the game of football. It's our players' passion, and it's their dream to not only have an unbelievable college experience, but for some of them to play in the NFL as well. So there's so many things that factor into this. But again, we're at a point right now that we got to do everything we possibly can to save the 2020 season and do it in a way that's not going to impact or have the least amount of impact on the 21 season. So yeah, in a perfect world, would you love to have games in Beaver Stadium this winter, and be able to have fans there and be able to help the local economy? Yes, without a doubt, 100%. But based on all the information we have, I don't know how realistic that is right now. And then obviously the challenges that we have in the Big Ten, that time of year is weather. It's funny because you say the fall and you say in the spring, but in this part of the country, the fall is more like the spring, and the spring is more like the fall when it comes to weather. So the domes provide an opportunity for consistency from a weather standpoint. And I think it also just helps with kind of the routine that, these domes, get used to working with the Big Ten and how we make it work. And you don't have, TV flying all over the country. They're able to set up, as a basically a home base in these cities and make it work. So, we're just at a point right now that we're trying to find any way we possibly can to make 20 work and do it in a way that it doesn't have impact on 21. But we're very aware of all the things that it impacts.
Mark Wogenrich, SI.com.
Hi, James. How are you? Really appreciate your time.
You too, Mark.
What did you consider your team's potential for a 2020 season, and how different do you think your team might look for a potential 2021 winter season, considering the options of opt-outs for the NFL draft, things like that?
Yeah, I think that's, obviously that's been probably one of the frustrations for a lot of our players and the parents, and I know our staff and coaches. I mean, we had a chance to be pretty good. I think we were preseason ranked inside the top 10 on almost everybody's chart. And, we were standing out there those first couple days at practice, and I'm looking around, and we got a good looking team. You know, we're big, we're long, we're lean. You know, we got a bunch of guys that are over 300 pounds that look like they're 270, 260. You know, we're fast, we're athletic. Yeah. So, you know, and then we had difference makers on both sides of the ball. So yeah, is that part of it, that you felt like this season had the opportunity or had the chance, not guaranteed, but had the opportunity and had the chance to be a special season for Penn State? Yes. Yes. So that's part of the frustration. But again, you know, I try not to spend time thinking about, you know, the things that I can't control. And I tell the team the same thing, and our staff the same thing, and our players the same thing. You know, let's try to focus on the things that we can control. All our guys are going to go on to be very, very successful businessmen. And the reality is, people don't pay you to identify the problems. They pay you to come up with solutions. And that's how we're trying to work moving forward, is how do we solve the challenges that we have right now at Penn State? How do we solve the problems and the challenges that we have right now in the Big Ten? How do we solve the challenges and the problems that we have in college football right now? And there's a lot of them.
Neil Rudell, Altoona Mirror.
Hey, James, sorry about the situation.
Hi, Neil.
I'm wondering, did you favor the Power Five being in unison, whether it's to all play or all to not play?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a responsibility to get everybody into a room together and have a conversation and put college athletics and put college football first, and try to exhaust that as much as you possibly can. Get all the leaders of all the conferences in one room together and say, what can we do to make this thing work the best we can for everybody? And then if it can't work, then at some point, you know, obviously the Big Ten's got to do what's best for the Big Ten at the end of the day, and the ACC's got to do what's best for the ACC at the end of the day, and so on and so forth. But there needed to be a effort to try to do what's best for student athletes and do what's best for college athletics and college football across the board first. That I think is very important, because once you start fracturing it and one group is doing one thing and another group is doing another, then you get all the problems that we're dealing with now. And there may have come a point that you couldn't do that, but that needed to be exhausted, you know, before making these decisions, in my mind. And how much that happened or how much that didn't happen, I'm not sure of.
Frank Bodani, York Daily Record.
Hi, good morning, James. As far as a spring semester season, can you give us a couple of particulars from your opinion on what would need to have to make it work the best way? Is there a couple of things you really believe need to happen to make that type of a winter spring season work well?
Yeah, I think it needs to be more of a winter season than a spring season. I think the later you go into the year, again, that's going to start to impact, you know, the following season. It's gonna have an impact on that in terms of you know, too many games in too short period of time, in terms of injury, enough time for guys to get healthy, for injury prevention, for the right amount of training that we have to do beforehand to be ready to compete. You know, all those things. How are you going to handle incoming recruits? How are you going to handle rosters? You know, how many guys are going to end up playing? How many guys aren't going to end up playing? And based on opting out, is the NFL going to move back the combine and the draft, which they have the ability to do based on the collective bargaining agreement. They have the ability to move the combine and the draft back. So those conversations are happening as well. All these things have got to be tied together to make it work effectively and efficiently for as many as possible.
Joe Giuliano, Philadelphia Inquirer.
Good morning, James.
Hey, Joe.
You talked in the last week about making sure your players fulfill their dreams and finishing this thing the right way. What does finishing the right way look like to you?
It's a great question, Joe. Going into this thing, what that meant is very different than what it is now. And right now is coming up with a model and coming up with a time that allows the majority of my guys to still get what they needed to get out of this season. That allows Penn State, that allows the Big Ten, that guys can still end up graduating, that guys can still leave Penn State feeling great about their experience over 4 or 5 years. That gives them the best opportunity to, hopefully play in the NFL one day. That gives them the opportunity to finish this thing out with their brothers, and represent this university, one more time. But yeah, Joe, that picture in your mind of what that was going to be before the season started to where we are now is very different, but for me, I got to try to work as hard as I can to create a new picture that looks as close to the old picture as we possibly can. And again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but do it in a way that has the least impact moving forward into 2021. And that's with how the season looks in 2021. That's in terms of our roster and how our roster looks in 2021. All of it. We want to try to get the picture back to as normal as we possibly can.
Ben Jones, statecollege.com.
Hey, James, how's it going?
Hey, Ben.
When you first got to Penn State, we talked to you a lot about breaking walls down with your players in terms of building those relationships. And it seems like this is the first time that I can think of in a while when people have been publicly unhappy with the Big Ten and Kevin Warren or the people that are in charge. How do you think coaches and administrators sort of break that wall down with him at this point? Because it seems like there's sort of a disconnect between his communication process and maybe your happiness right now.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ben. I think at the end of the day, we all have responsibilities to our campuses, and we have a responsibility to our players and to our administration, at Penn State. But we also have a responsibility to the Big Ten and the leadership of the Big Ten. I also feel like we have a responsibility to the NCAA and the model that we're currently working within. Those all must be complementary pieces, and they all got to work together. And as we can all imagine, I don't know if this is the ideal situation, to be working in and be working in the first time. I know if I was a head coach at Penn State my first year and everything this happened, it'd be a much different, perspective than I have now, but for me, the way I look at it is that I have a responsibility to Penn State and the people on this campus and the people in this community, but I also have a responsibility to the Big Ten and try to make all those things work the best we possibly can. And that includes a responsibility to Kevin Warren, and our conference.
We have time for a couple more questions. We'll start with Nate Bauer, Blue Wade Illustrated.
Hey, James, how are you?
Hey, Nate.
Hey, I apologize if I'm asking you to repeat yourself. You've touched on this a little bit, but can you maybe speak to the magnitude of the effort that went into making that first week of preseason practice work, and whether or not you felt like that was feasible or viable over the long term to maintain a system like that?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes on a lot of campuses, because so many people work so hard to make it work. A lot of people sacrificed a lot of things to allow for the football season to happen. That's players making sacrifices. We've always had open practices at Penn State, being able to get on the call and tell the parents can't come to practices anymore. That's just one example. There's so many sacrifices being made to make it work. I felt like a mother hen. I mean, I would walk around all day long, in the office telling people to cover their nose, because we all see it. People that have the mask on down here or not here. So I spent the entire of my day walking around telling people to cover their face up completely or they were going to be sent home. I spent the entire day at practice running around the practice field that as soon as they took their helmet off, that was a full visor, that they had to slide up their mask, that when guys were talking and interacting with each other, that they needed to spread out and be 6 feet as much as they possibly could. So I spent my entire time doing that, and so did a lot of people on our staff. And the challenge is you work so hard to create this culture and this chemistry and building this organization that runs like a family. I think a lot of people talk about being a family, but they're really not. And we have gotten to an unbelievable place as an organization, and we've worked to build these habits, and now we're trying to break them all down. How people interact, it was challenging, but we made those decisions and we made those sacrifices, and it was working. It was working really well, and we weren't naive that we didn't think there was going to be challenges and there was going to be some positive cases in the community and on campus and within our football team. But everybody was at a place where we felt like we were controlling as many of the variables as we possibly could. And it was working. And literally to get the test back, that after doing it and essentially practicing within what the rules would allow us to do. And the funny thing is, everybody talks about tackling. You never tackle in college football now anyway, so we're pretty much doing everything that we would do. And we were doing it for a period of time that if we didn't have the right structure in place, it would have been obvious. And we did it and didn't have one positive, over that period of time. So I think we were showing that the plan worked. And I think that was a similar conversation that I had with a lot of coaches, not only within the Big Ten, but across the country, that it was working, So again, I'm not naive to think that this was going to be smooth sailing the whole time. But I think that was the hard part, Nate, is so many people had worked so hard to come up with a plan to make it work. And then all of a sudden it changes and you weren't a part of the conversation and you didn't completely understand why. And the thing that I was trying to have control over our campus was working pretty good. So I hope that answers your question, Nate.
Our last question today will come from T. Frank Carr from ESPN Radio.
Hey, James. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. From your perspective, football players come to school for an education, but they also come for a football education. And you've already mentioned how you're frustrated about 12 hours is not enough time to give those players what they're coming to school for. When you step back and look at the whole picture of high schools having disruption in football education and colleges having disruption in football education for the better part of a year now, what does that do for you, I guess, just as a part of the football community? How frustrating is that? And how do you reset that so that there isn't, a long-term impact that you've talked about going forward?
Well, I guess the decision has been made right now, but I hope through conversations like this and the power of the media and maybe some more healthy dialogue within the NCAA and within the Big Ten, that maybe we can get it changed. But I think that's the other hard part about this is there's just so many mixed messages out there. I truly believe that this decision was made based on health and welfare. But the problem is right now, as we all know, you talk to 6 different doctors, you're going to get 6 different answers. And then the other challenge is, I was talking to Pat Chambers the other day on the phone, and he was taking his son, to Little League football practice. And he was telling me there's 130 kids out there at Little League football practice. And I think we got more resources and a plan to keep our guys safe. So when, you're talking to basketball coaches and you hear about what's going on in AAU basketball and gyms, and that's the challenge, is the inconsistency that you feel and that you see, and that's what makes it so difficult to understand. And that's what makes it so difficult is you hear certain conferences talking about, the decisions that they're making based on the medical people they're talking to, and then the decisions that we're making, and then how one conference is getting to work with their guys like a full football season, and we're being only limited to 12 hours. There's just inconsistency. And then that goes back to, I think, the question that Neil asked earlier. As much as you can keep this thing similar, that every college student athlete across the country is having as similar of an experience as possible, I think that's in the best interest of college athletics. I think that's in the best interest of the student athletes. That the NCAA that I grew up with was about trying to create as level of a playing field as you possibly could create. And right now we're not living within those times. The times are very different right now. And I think that's challenging, especially at a time when people can get on the internet or on social media and consume so much information so quickly. That makes it real challenging when you're living under these circumstances and you can get on the internet or get on social media and actually watch another team practicing or scrimmaging, having a live scrimmage in their stadium. The inconsistency, I think, is the hard part for everybody.
That's all the time we have for Coach Franklin today. Appreciate everybody's time popping in this morning, and appreciate your time, Coach. Stay safe.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
I appreciate everybody. I also want to thank Chris Peterson, all you guys. I think there's been a great deal of access to our players and our staff during this time period. I hope you guys feel like it's been more than most. I know it's never enough, but I hope you guys feel like it was more than most. And Chris Peterson and Greg Kincaid, I appreciate you organizing that. So everybody stay safe and stay healthy. And I wish everybody the best. And I look forward to getting back and being able to see Rich Scarcella's face up and close and live. I don't necessarily feel that way about everybody, but I do feel that way about most. Have a great day, guys.